Hello, friends. I just wanted to say that I appreciate all of your patience as we work through technology, both the mood lighting that some of you who were here at 10:45 were able to enjoy as we work with the auditorium lights. Turns out that the middle lights are out. They're being replaced, and that's why we've been trying to play around with the front lights. And also not have me bake up here, but still allow you to see me. And then because we're going to be videotaping, sounds like I'm on. Maybe I'm on now. Okay. Because we're going to be videotaping this, we are also just making sure that the sound person has me coordinated with the video. So it sounds like I might be on now.
Can everybody hear okay? Angela, please?
Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to give a quick introduction. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alyssa Ewer, and I work in the graduate school in the Office of Professional Development and Engagement. And I wanted to welcome and thank you all for coming today. We're excited to see so much interest in this new training, which is part of the graduate school seminar series. And I wanted to commend you on your interest in building skills and knowledge to help graduate students in their career pursuits. Today's speaker, who will kick off this training series, is Dr. Angela Byars-Winston. Angela is an associate professor in the Department of Medicine, Division of General Internal Medicine at SMPH. Her research interests include the examination of cultural influences on career development, especially for racial and ethnic minorities and women in science, engineering, and medicine. Today she will provide us with a broad overview of critical factors that contribute to graduate student success and introduce topics of career development theory, mentoring, and individual development plans. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Angela Byars-Winston.
So first I want to thank Alyssa and her staff, including all of the folk in the Graduate and the Professional Development Office, as well as Dean Wendy Crone for the forward-thinking vision of having a career development series. I've been on this campus 17 years as a professor, and my passion is career development. I'm actually trained as a vocational psychologist, which is a fancy term for the psychology of career development. How is it that people become attracted to, or in some cases repelled away from, various occupations? And also specifically understanding how people see themselves in relationship to work as they progress through their educational training. And so to have so many great folk in the room and interested in career development is just like a wonderful boost to my spirit here, because I feel like sometimes the career development conversation gets a little covered in other types of discourse on campus about promoting student success. So again, thank you for this opportunity. And as Alyssa mentioned, I have this ridiculously high, tall order to fill in 55 minutes, which we're not going to meet, right? So all things related to career development theory and mentoring and IDP plans, which even the folk who are charged with IDPs are still trying to figure it out. So I won't be solving anything. My job is to kind of facilitate some, hopefully, insights for you, and to take an inward assessment of your own training programs, your own departments, relative to what are they doing intentionally to address career development. So with that in mind, you should have two handouts in your hand at this point. One is a single sheet that has the 6 major slides, believe it or not. For those of you who know me, and some of you were afraid, some of my friends are in the room, they're like, I know you're going to have like 20 slides of theories and all kinds of figures. Actually, I have like 12 slides. Again, for the people who know me, this is where you go, gasp. And so we're going to focus more on the second sheet, which is for you to start thinking about what is going on in your own training program, your own department, and what can you do to facilitate the infrastructure that will facilitate and support the career development needs of your students. With that in mind, I also want to acknowledge that my other task as the initial presenter of this series is to kind of give a broad enough overview for you to understand and maximize the ongoing seminars that are coming up in 2 weeks and then 3 weeks later after that. And so I want to make sure that at the right time, there's some of those folk who are here in the room, I'll point them out and ask them to just kind of wave their hands, because you should see this as really a whole part together, working to build on one another. So I have 4 quick goals for our time together. One is to raise our awareness about the career development process. Again, this is one of those things where everybody has a relationship to work, right? No matter where you are in the world, everybody has a relationship to work. And so it's something that we take for granted, like air and water. But there are actually theories and actual formal frameworks that have been designed over 100 years That's not exaggeration, relative to how do we help facilitate people in their career development. Secondly, I'd like to provide a framework that will help us in approaching career development facilitation, and then encourage your intentionality in facilitating students' career development, and then a few concrete strategies for enhancing your career development effort with your students. And again, hopefully you'll start to see the ongoing kind of building process that will happen across these resources that are offered in the seminar series. So one thing that stands out to me is kind of what is our purpose in graduate education. I want you to actually talk to me. When you think about graduate education and why students pursue advanced degrees, what comes to mind? Why do they go to graduate school? Just shout it on out. Go ahead.
I went to graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I'm paying my student loan.
Oh, okay, so a financial strategy, right?
My undergrad was in psychology, and I knew I couldn't get a job with that degree, so I just kept going.
Same with me.
Sometimes there's not a rhyme or reason
Right.
for graduate.
So it could be financial strategies for forbearance of loans, maybe not knowing, having an undergraduate degree that doesn't directly translate into a profession, other reasons.
Further develop their technical skills. and-
That's a critical one.
And prove that, produce a research or a thesis paper or something that will assist them in moving forward in their career.
So career movement, additional technical skill, deeper knowledge, learning. One or two other hands. Did I see your hand? Did I see another hand? Yes.
To differentiate yourself?
To differentiate yourself. Say more about that.
I guess sort of in the psychology of for some of the larger programs, I mean, you can have sort of very large undergraduate program, and then you would go into graduate school to sort of differentiate yourselves from your peers and others that graduated in your class.
Right. Fantastic. So one of the things, go right ahead.
Encouragement from their professor if they were doing undergraduate research.
That's a big piece,
and
especially.
postdocs, encouraging them to go on to grad school.
Yes, and especially I think in the applied and life sciences, many folk are mentored into research because, again, the opportunity to be a part of an extended research inquiry or a program or a lab is very attractive. Okay. So one of the things, oh, sure, I don't want to miss any hands.
Oh, no, I was just going to say to be qualified to do a certain career, like be licensed or certified.
Right, so certification or licensure might require, like in psychology, in order to practice the craft, you actually have to go for advanced training to be eligible for the certification and licensure. So all of these are multiple reasons why people go to graduate school. The point I want to make and why I ask that question is at the end of the degree, the focus is usually the same, employment. But think about how much time we spend in our graduate training programs on that part compared to percentage-wise, the technical acquisition of skills, the deeper learning, et cetera. And yet the end goal is the same, that they're employed. In fact, some of our departments actually have to have the employability outcomes of the students on their website so students can have kind of truth in advertising. Where do students go who get this degree in this department? Right, so when we start to think about the reason we're focusing on this seminar is that much of our work in graduate education is focused on this box of what I'll just call the know what skills. This is the mastery of technical and disciplinary knowledge in the field. So most of what was said in the room, right? And most of that is going to be facilitated, or we assume rests on the shoulders of the faculty, the major advisor, the faculty mentor. And so, interestingly, this piece that helps us to think about how do people translate what they're learning in their graduate training and apply it so they're ready for employment is what could be called know-how skills. Bill Copeland, who's a professor in the business school at Syracuse University, has a whole book that he's written on this. And specifically, the combination of this know-what skills with know-how skills is what helps to facilitate people's career development. And this know-how skill box really helps us to think about how do people develop the tacit skills, like knowing how to do something, not it's just the technical piece, but knowing what to do. What are the options? How do I translate the various skills I have to craft a career that fits who I am? Okay. And this is the part where we often find, by hook or crook or by default, the onus is often just left on the shoulders of the graduate program coordinator, that you all will help to organize programming and activities and resources or point students towards those resources that will help complement what they get in their training. And this is the piece I want to focus on for today, the know what skills. And specifically interventions that will facilitate that. So to get us started, you have a sheet that has a table on the bottom. The top half, I'm going to give you a few minutes now to think about what are some of the career development needs and challenges for your students in your training program or your department. That is, when you think about the themes or patterns of roadblocks or concerns or issues or requests for career development materials or information that your students are seeking, what comes up? Are they really thinking about job prospects and thinking about labor market projections, like will there be a career in biostatistics for me? Are they thinking about challenges relating to certification? Or am I getting the right types of skills that will get me eligible for licensure, I think somebody mentioned. What are some of the challenges or career needs that you have observed in your role for your students in your training program? So at least try to jot down at least 2. I put a space before there. Just give you kind of a minute or 2 to think about that. And it may be the very reason that you came today is the thing that you've been kind of wrestling with. How do I fit these needs, or how do I address these concerns for my students? Give you another minute. Take another 30 seconds or so, and hopefully you've had at least a chance to write down, if not 2, at least 1. Okay, everybody have at least 1 written down, perhaps 2? Okay. Just a few folk to share. What are some of the needs and challenges relating to career development that you've been seeing in your students or observing in your students? A couple of folk to share, yes.
Yeah, a lot of our students will notice a growing body of literature that suggests that universities are kind of trending towards adjunct professors, and it freaks them out, saying how am I going to get a tenure track position if everyone's moving towards adjuncts.
So the declining opportunities for tenure track positions, at least right after the degree is finished, because they're probably in line after the queue of people who finished their PhD in 2008 who are still waiting to get positions, right? So the 2014 graduates are not just competing with the other class of 2014 around the country, but folks who've been in the pipeline for a while waiting for those openings. Yes.
Development about jobs outside of academia.
What are the options outside of academia, right? So most faculty, and I was one of those folks, I kind of take my own medicine as well. We're good at training people to do what we do, right? And so we end up creating mini-me's or looking for kind of cloning processes through our graduate training, but it's very difficult for us, many faculty, to kind of push ourselves out and think about what would policy opportunities look like for psychologists. Somebody has to lobby for mental health reform, for example, in the country. If you're in graphic arts or in the humanities and thinking about mass communication, ways that people can communicate, for example, reducing high-risk behaviors like smoking cessation. A lot of the ads that come out have to have people understand both the science but also a graphic way to present ways to say, just say no. I'm always amazed by the different kinds of billboards and ads that come out for reducing high-risk behaviors. Okay? So thinking about other options besides tenure track, especially because many of them are limited. 1 or 2 other people, career needs, yes.
Trying to figure out how to match the catch-22 of having the number of years of experience
So you have the degree.
But having the experience in school, but they don't consider that because it's not considered full-time.
That's right. That's a big issue, especially for folk who are coming out in the helping professions, right, as we were saying before. You have the degree, but if, for example, as a psychologist, you have to have another 1,000 or so hours after the PhD just to be eligible for licensure, to be able to independently practice, which means you have to be under somebody's supervision for a long time. Okay? Yes?
I see some international students who want to get into the professional track, and that makes it hard, who want to go into professional jobs, and it makes it hard for them to find jobs in the United States if that's where they want to stay.
Mm-hmm. So especially if there are visa issues for people in terms of what their limitations are for the types of work that they might be pursuing, could also have an impact on their career concerns. So I'm going to suggest, thank you for sharing, I'm going to suggest that all of these career concerns and needs can basically be summarized or captured in one of these three primary career development questions. Who am I? Where am I going? And how do I get there? Now, these three questions were kind of very ubiquitous in the career development literature as the kind of the triad model, if you will, of career development and career concerns, and specifically thinking about ways that people understand who they are. Get my little pointer again. Who they are, what are their interests, needs, skills, and values. What are the options that I have, which are, again, the career concerns that people were talking about in terms of the options after the doctorate or master's degree, as well as how do I get there? What is my action plan or my strategy for getting myself from A to B? I'm going to suggest, and this is where for those of you who know me, I will do a little bit of theory, but not a lot. I'm going to suggest that one helpful construct for us to consider as we imagine programmatic efforts and interventions to facilitate our students' career development might be career readiness. Career readiness is a term that actually Donald Super developed in the 1960s. Believe it or not, as I said, this research area has been around a long time. That was really prompted after World War II, helping to think about how do you integrate veterans from military life back into civilian life. It actually started at the University of Minnesota, for those of you who are Gophers. And so career readiness really is also known as career maturity, which also has a little judgment to it. When you say maturation, it sounds like there's an evaluation to it, like you're either mature or immature. So we use the term career readiness. But it has to do with one's successful coping with the current developmental tasks or required decisions for where a person finds himself in their life stage. So whatever the current stage of life that you're in, how effectively are you managing those career tasks, those career decisions that will help you move to the next step? Career readiness can be distinguished from career decisions because career decisions are isolated events that occur at a specific point in time. What am I deciding to do for perhaps my dissertation thesis, or what am I going to do for the internship? So these discrete kind of decisions. But career readiness is a process. It unfolds over time, it's developmental in nature, and it is inclusive of two components, both the attitudes that people have in relationship to work and their career opportunities, but also the thoughts that they have relative to that. How am I changing relative to my own interests, my own goals? My experience for having been a graduate educator for 9 years in the counseling psych department and chairing a lot of dissertations and advising a lot of students is that somehow going through the doctoral program, I would say at least 50 to 60% of students change their career plan, right? It's a transformational process. And so as people are evolving relative to their new training, their new exposure, perhaps they go to a conference, they present an abstract, or they go to a job talk for someone else, and they say, gosh, that's the work that really turns me on. I'm really excited about that. And it's different than what they put on their statement of interest, for graduate school. So this career readiness is evolving over time because people's perceptions of who they are, their cognitions, as well as their attitudes about the world of work change. And one of the things I want to highlight, especially about attitudes relative to career readiness, is many of our students, dare I say most adults, are dealing with a chronic case of career myths. A lot of misinformation. Oops, hello. Is it too light? Is it too loud? Because I can dim it a little bit more of a control up here. Hello. I have that sultry voice, so you may not want to put those lights down too low. Everybody will go to sleep. That's actually true. I had clients who would fall asleep doing therapy sometimes. My voice was a little bit too hypnotic. Is that better? I'm so sorry. I should have maybe made this black text. Is that okay? You can manage. Okay. So this career myths have to do with misinformation, stereotypes, false assumptions about work, as well as myself. Like one career myth that's really popular that it affects a lot of people who have this disease. There's one right career for me. And that's it. And they get depressed, they get disheveled if they don't have it. I want to be a professor, they want them to be tenure track. Not a lot of room for degrees of freedom then, if the jobs might be a little bit more tenuous to find. What's another career myth that people deal with? Can you think of one? That you're seeing?
You love what you do.
Say it again?
You have to love what
you have to love what you do. Some people, I lived in Spain, and they say that the Americans work to live, and in there they live to work. Or no, the Americans are live to work, and in Europe, at least in Spain, they work to live. So you go to work as a means to an end to have the finances to spend time with your family or to vacation the way you want to. And so values about the work, the centrality of work to one's life is also sometimes misinformed or kind of off for some people. Like, I have to find work that fits all of my needs, right? And you may find work that fits some of your needs. And so a career information or career counselor might say, gosh, how can you find all of these needs met? Perhaps some by paid work and some by unpaid work or volunteer experiences, or thinking about a career succession over time of 5 or 6 career opportunities that over 20 or 30 years will fit those needs. So there are a lot of career myths that we're dealing with. So when I talk about attitudes and relative to career readiness and how graduate school can change some of these perceptions, that's part of the change. That's part of the developmental process, right? So career readiness is evolving over time, not just in terms of how I see myself in relationship to work, but my attitudes about the career process and my relationship to the work in general. Any questions before I go on? I just kind of said a whole lot. We're going to go to a few more slides of theory, and then we're going to talk about some resources. Any questions or comments before I go on? So my argument, just to give you my assumptions out on the table, and I'm saying this by putting myself in the process as well since I was a graduate educator, is most of what we give our students in graduate school is career exposure. They might do an internship, they might do a practicum, they might go to the great sessions that Alyssa and her office in graduate professional development in the graduate school offer. They might go to career panels, they go to conferences, a lot of professional development that gives them exposure to possibilities. Without having career readiness, this intervening process of understanding who am I in relationship to work, how am I changing in terms of my attitudes of myself, how do I have a clear, stable sense of who I am, my career identity, we're not going to get to what we hope students have, which is career awareness. So we assume that we can jump from giving people a career panel that's really exciting and engaging and great speakers, has nothing to do with the presenters, that they'll be able to jump to, now I understand what I'm going to do and how I might create a plan to get there. And so I'm going to suggest for our time, the remaining time that we have, we're going to focus a little bit on career readiness, because the ultimate goal that I have for at least the graduate students I work with, dare I say all graduate students, all students, is that they form lifelong career management skills. How do I create a template for myself that can go with me as my life changes, as my roles change? Perhaps somebody becomes a parent unexpectedly in graduate school. Now you have a different consideration about what are your career options after a graduate, after the graduate degree. Perhaps a family member becomes ill, and you're the one who's going to have to stay closer to home than you, and geographically limited unexpectedly. Okay, so that happened to my mother. She was accepted to go off to Barnard College, very exciting for her as an African-American woman growing up in the 40s and 50s in the segregated South, to go to New York, and my grandmother got sick. And so she stayed right there in Savannah, Georgia, which it worked out, but there were life changes that happened. And so how do you create a template that is big enough to hold the developmental process that's planned and unplanned experiences that are going to happen to students that will carry them through? And that's what I'd like to talk about today. Does this make sense? Okay. So what are the 4 components of career readiness? As I said, this was developed by Donald Super in the 1960s, who's a career psychologist, a vocational psychologist, who theorized how does career unfold across the lifespan. And he suggested that these 4 processes, or these 4 components, would help to facilitate individuals' relationship to work and to create a plan, or if you will, a template that would facilitate career readiness. And I'm going to go through these very quickly, and then I'm going to have us on the bottom half of the sheet where you just put down your career needs, start to think about your program or your development in relationship to these 4 components. What is your program doing? What are you doing that can facilitate each one of these areas? And do you see some spaces in your program in current resources that are top-heavy in one box but lacking in others? We're going to talk about that. Career identity, as I mentioned before, is a critical part for any career development professional. We're always going to think about, first of all, who are you? It's kind of like the opening line for a therapy session, right? What's going on with you? Who are you? What makes you tick? And so I want to get a sense of individuals' goals, their interests, and talents. Do they know their own abilities? Do they have a sense of what they're good at? One of the things I often have undergraduates do, specifically with group career interventions I do, is they have to interview people in their life, a close circle, family member, or intimate partner who knows them, as if that person, well, asking that person, what do they think my student is good at? Many of our students don't even have a sense of all of the skill sets that they have and all of the competencies they have. So having other people who know your individual, your student as well, also think about their skills, their talents and their abilities are really useful. One of the questions that could come out specifically when you think about career identity is, what career pathway suits me? Can I emphasize this enough? At this time. Again, I'm trying to unpack that career myth that there's one right job for me. It's going to happen probably that you'll have a couple of career possibilities over time. And again, other colleagues are going to be presenting in the series will probably share those data about the number of jobs that people are expected to have, and sometimes even completely different career paths over a lifetime. So career identity is critical. That is the fulcrum against which all of these other factors are balancing, of having a clear, stable sense of who I am. That's the who am I. These remaining questions, exploration and planning, relate to the number 2 and 3, go back to where am I going? Okay, so I want to keep our questions. Who am I? How do I get there? Where am I going and how do I get there? So questions, or points number 2 and 3 relate to where am I going? Career exploration has to do with information gathering. Do I have a sense of what are the possibilities relating to career paths? For example, in biomedical research, what is biomedical research and what are related careers that exist for this field? Because again, as the gentleman mentioned, it may not be a tenure track position, but there are great opportunities in private industry. There are great opportunities in patent law, for example. People need to know science in order to help develop different ways to govern the policies relating to research. Number 3 is relating to career planning, and this is specifically gaining knowledge about the necessary actions to pursue a goal. If I'm going to be a biomedical researcher, what is it going to take? If I'm going to psychology, what does it take to get licensure? At what points do I have to hit a certain number of clinical hours? Who can supervise me, for example, over my clinical supervision? Does it have to be somebody who has the same degree I have, or can it be a school psychologist who supervises me as a counseling psychologist? Okay? So career planning is about information gathering relating to what are the necessary actions to pursue that goal. So what does it take to work in those careers? How do I get there is the action plan. That's point number 4, decision making. Narrowing career options, weighing career information and alternatives, and thinking about, again, what career pathway can I commit to at this time? Relative to all of the other roles I play, the willingness I have, as somebody mentioned before, to take on more expenses. It might be another level of training, especially if a student is going into perhaps a clinical degree, where like an MD, they may have to go on for internship and obviously fellowships, et cetera. It's going to cost money. Am I willing to take that much time to invest in this particular career path? So as we think about these 4 components of career readiness, the goal is to start to think about how are our programs and our departments providing and facilitating opportunities to be very intentional about how our interventions and our activities map onto one of these 4 components. My hunch is that most of us spend a lot of time on number 2, right? Giving people exposure. And again, exploration about various careers. You might even be sending your students to various offices on campus. You might be sending them to certain websites that might be in your profession where history majors go to figure out what can I do with this degree, or what are the opportunities and the prospects for a history major. My challenge to us is to think about what else could you be doing that supports these other 3 boxes. Because the research that has existed for a couple of decades suggests that when individuals go through all 4 of these processes, they have a bigger sense of a decision-making template that they carry with them across time with the goal of creating lifelong career management. Okay? That's my biggest shtick. That's the ta-dum-dum-bum-bum. And my question to you now, before we go on to turning this over to you, any thoughts, any observations or comments before we continue? Yes?
So one thought I have is, I work mostly with PhD students who I would hope that they already thought about what they want to do before coming into a PhD program. And maybe I'm operating on a wrong assumption there.
I think the laughter suggests that you're not alone in that assumption, but it's probably incorrect.
Yeah, it just seems like, wow, they've gotten to this point where they're in a PhD program and they haven't thought about that stuff yet.
So we could also take the example I gave a few minutes ago about career myths our students have and think about career myths we have as the professionals working with our students. And I think many of us assume there's a lot more career maturity or career readiness than is there because, again, this is a top-rated university, not just in the country, in the world. Our programs, many of the departments and programs that we represent right in this room are in the top 4 or 5 or so in the entire country. We draw the best and the brightest students. We have outstanding graduate students, master's and doctoral level. And because they are so well polished, and they have gone through these screening processes and made it into your wonderful departments and programs, we know that they already come with a lot of social capital. They come with a lot of resources and strategies for how to present themselves well. They have the right speak for your discipline. They sound very put together, and they are relative to the know what skills. And that's why I gave that model a few slides ago about the know what and the know how skills. And so when you make that comment about we make a lot of assumptions that our students have a lot more process or time that they've spent on this, my experience working with undergraduates and then graduates is that I don't see in higher education in this country where people should systematically get opportunities to do this at the undergraduate level, let alone the graduate level. And so my hunch is that we could imagine that many of our students would benefit from some of these resources. In fact, I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the programs I have the privilege to be a part of with Molly Carnes. It's her training program for graduate doctoral students who are underrepresented racial ethnic minorities in the biomedical and behavioral sciences. The team science program, Sharon Top, who's the program coordinator, is here. And one of the things that we've done is taken a lot of this material, surprise, surprise, since I'm on the executive committee, I'm going to say you have to do this. And we have found that our students are benefiting from this, not just for themselves, but their mentors, because guess what? The faculty are excited because now students are coming with meat to their advising sessions. I've been thinking about X, Y, or Z. I've gathered this information about myself, although there are some challenges because, especially if a student is not interested in going into an academic or a tenure track position, there are challenges as they negotiate their relationship with their PI. But in general, starting to think about ways that they're more empowered to ask more pointed questions. I'll tell you, for me as a professor, it is very frustrating to have a student come in and say, mold me, I'm a lump of clay, tell me what I should do, help me think about these things. I'm hoping they've come with some of this already, and now we can kind of work with this a little bit more. I have some more meat to work with, more substance. And so I want to share with you a few resources that we have developed in the team science program. But before we do that, I just want to do a quick environmental scan, or have you think about a quick environmental scan using this bottom half of this worksheet of what you already are doing. And since I don't want to spend all the time on this, but I want to get it started for us and hope that you'll take this and continue perhaps with your colleagues in your department or your training programs to fill it in. What I want you to think about are the current opportunities and programmatic offerings in your training program or your department. I've divided this resource into the 4 components of career readiness, and then 2 separate columns relative to what you can do as a program coordinator and what you can coordinate or encourage your mentor, your faculty working with the students also to do. I have a hunch it's probably going to take you a little bit more time to think about that latter part. So what I'd like for you just to do very quickly, and I'm just going to give us about 2 minutes or so, is just think about, if you don't have time to write, that's okay, but just think about the current offerings that you provide your students. It could be seminar series, it could be practica, it could be one-on-one meetings, it could be group sessions that you have, and where in these 4 components of career readiness are you hitting these issues? Again, my question to you is to be thinking about, are you more top-heavy on certain areas of career readiness than others? And for those places where you're lighter, how can you fill in or how can you add on some material or resources or interventions to fill that out? So again, just take a, yes, Sybil, I said Moira earlier, so sorry, Sybil.
So I think a lot of times we use our website to push out information trying to address these 4 areas with the idea that not every single student is going to make contact with the department and come in for help or come to the seminar series that we spend hours planning and come to all of the other events. So we think, I want to make sure students get something.
Yes.
So I stick it out there on my website, and I'm wondering how effective is that, because the things you mentioned, the seminar series and the internships and those things are, you got the warm body
right, in person.
In front of you.
Right.
But if I'm pushing it out on the website, any thoughts on how effective that is to perhaps provide some of this as information?
Well, that's a good question. I just happened to chair a dissertation on Whiscareers, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, which is an online career development intervention or career development resource. And she did a randomized control study, Ann Philback-Watt, Dr. Ann Philback-Watt, as of last month, looking at undergrads here in the LNS, and she randomized them to a treatment and a waitlist control group, taking the website with no direction, just here's a link that you could use Whiscareers sometime over the 4 weeks. And just having access to the resource, she was able to track, did they use it, how many logins, what pages did they go to, and compare that to the control group, which was basically said, hey, thanks for coming into the study, and then 4 weeks later she gave them the link to say, by the way, here's your resource. What she found is that the students in the treatment condition, which had the resource, actually didn't log in a whole lot, as she would have thought, no more than 1 time, and she was able to look at the length of time logged in, 20, 30 minutes or so, and they weren't even taking the assessments. There are a lot of materials that are available on Whiscareers, which I'll share with you. And so essentially what she found is she did an assessment on career decidedness or anxiety about making a career. And again, these are for undergraduates. And simply having access to the resource reduced the treatment conditions scores on career anxiety and anxiety about making a career decision. Even though they didn't use that much, even though they didn't do any assessments, out of the 80 or so people in that treatment condition, I think there were like 10 people who actually did an assessment. So we know that having access to resources is part of an intervention itself. It starts to make people think, oh, when I take Sybil's suggestion or even see that there's a webinar available for this or resource available, something starts to turn. Remember I said that career readiness includes attitudinal and cognitive dimensions. And just by somebody saying, hey, why is it that you want to go into this degree? Or since you've started this graduate program, how are you changing in terms of your career path? Huh, never thought about that. And we know from psychological theory when people go, huh, they look up in the ceiling, something's happening. We call that cognitive dissonance. Huh, Never thought of it that way. That's important because it starts to make people think about how are they in relationship to the world of work. Now my question to you is how do you structure that so that you're able to inventory, like a good teacher would have a crosswalk sheet, right? Think of a K-12 teacher. Here are the things I do, here are my curricula, here are my lessons, and here are the different competencies that DPI told me I have to hit. Have we done that with our career resources? And have we done that with our offerings? So when I hear your question, simple to me, I'm interested in can you organize the materials that you send out in a certain way, even having a little bit of thought relative to what am I sending out, what emails am I forwarding, what opportunities am I passing on to students, and where am I needing to add additional areas, for example, more time to think about planning, because they're getting a lot of exploration. How can I facilitate, what do I need to know, and what access to resources that I need to have to help them have more time to think about how do I create an action plan? Okay. Does that make sense, Eileen?
Yes, I wanted to follow up on, you mentioned with the Whiscareers that they didn't do the assessments. And what we find too is that graduate students really want to skip over that first step, and that whether it's because of a myth or time or whatever. And I'm just wondering if you have any strategies from team science or from other sources about how to make them do that.
Yes. So let me start to give out resources. I've realized the few minutes we're going to take with this, we just used it. So I'm going to encourage you to continue. I think you're getting the gist of why I want you to think about filling this in. So I'm going to use this time now to transition at Eileen's nice segue for me to start thinking about concrete resources. Okay? So one of the things we've been doing in team science that is unique, and I realize every department or training program may not be able to do this, especially if you're working with master's programs that are large, it may be difficult to do this, but we make the mentors part of this process. The faculty are part of the process. We encourage them to think of themselves as career coaches besides knowledge purveyors. Most of them think about themselves as the transmitters of the specific deep knowledge and learning in their discipline, in their field. My job is to help teach you how to be a good historian, how to be a good biochemist, how to be a good psychologist. And oftentimes our mentors are not as conscientious, our faculty are not as conscientious about how am I modeling what it is to be this professional? How am I modeling and communicating the opportunities that might exist in our field? And so we've brought them along in the process, and that's a unique piece because it allows us then to have a leverage point for the student to say, you're going to be talking about these things, and your mentor is going to be looking for you to have this information. So I'm going to hand out some resources, if I may, that you might consider. One of them is oh, thank you so much. Okay, thanks. One of them that I'm handing out now to help our students think more about in the team science program, the identity piece as well as the career planning piece. Who am I and where am I going? Is a SWOT analysis. It's a career SWOT analysis that I've adapted with Sharon from the business world. SWOT is the acronym that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we've just made that a career SWOT. What are some of the strengths that individuals have relative to their own field? What are some of the threats to their own career development in terms of, it might be limitations geographically, financial, it might be multiple roles that they're managing. What are some of the opportunities that they can take advantage of or that they have been exposed to, as well as the weaknesses that they have? And so we start to have students first, in the beginning of team science, everyone has to do this analysis. We ask them to do this at least once a year and talk about it with their advisors. On the front side of that sheet are the prompts for those 4 quadrants. On the back side are the questions and bullet points to help them think about what do we mean by strengths, by weaknesses, by opportunities and threats.
We're getting more copies.
Okay, so sorry. It's great that there are more people here than we expected. Okay, there's 2 more. And I'm sorry I don't have thank you. I'm sorry I don't have a copy projector up here. But the goal for us is to create a culture of career readiness mindedness. How do we help to socialize students from the beginning of their graduate training to be thinking about themselves as an evolving career professional. Again, the end goal after the degree is employment, and helping them to think about even 30 minutes of reflecting. 30 minutes of reflecting. After 2 years of your master's program, 2 or 3 years, 5, 7 years of your PhD student, 30 minutes once a semester to reflect on who am I, where am I going, how do I get there? Not bad. If we can make that more systematic so that maybe it's 1 hour a month that they are encouraged to, perhaps a program sends out an email prompt from the, I'll just say the neuroscience training program. NTP sends out an email to their students. Have you taken, you know how doctors would say, have you taken your medicine today? Maybe once a month. Have you thought about your career or your career development this month? Here's a prompt. What if your program came up with, based on this conversation today, a question that you could send out once or twice a semester to your students? You don't know if they'll read it, but they might. Maybe you want to create a little bit of an evaluation process for your department to find out if people are actually doing this. What are they finding out about themselves? How's it changing their engagement with their advisor, with their mentor? What kinds of questions and resources are they now more empowered to ask about? Gosh, Alyssa, I'm so glad you sent that email. You know what? I want to know more about X, Y, or Z. Because you sent me that email, made me start to think about how I don't know the opportunities beyond becoming a tenure track faculty member. Something strategic like that doesn't cost you anything, but a little time and thoughtfulness and planfulness, an email prompt goes a long way. It'd be great if you made a Facebook, or not a Facebook, I sound so dated now, but an app, right? An app for that. We have great technology on campus. I would love to see our programs coordinate with tech folk here and have a career development app, or Bucky career development app. I don't know, I'm just making up on the spot. And people got a prompt, because we know, again, from other research in terms of psychology that helps with smoking cessation, for example. Giving those small prompts in the daytime, when you're most likely to Jones or Benz for that cigarette, might be helpful. And that's for reducing risky behavior. So let's put in the positive spin. How do you promote healthy behavior, right? And so we could also think about those prompts for students. Additionally, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the materials outside of team science that I've also been a part of and developed that were just useful ways for us as a team, my research team, to think about how do we help students become deliberate and agentic about their own career development. That is, how do we help them to be empowered and active in proactively advocating for their career development. So I was a part of a grant, the Sloan Project, back in about 10 years ago, that we worked with CALS, the Agricultural Life Sciences College, and with engineering. And we had a grant for a couple of years to work with underrepresented racial minority students in those two colleges. And part of what we were interested in was understanding how they navigated the cultural context of being one of the lonely onlys and one of the few URM students, underrepresented racial ethnic minority students in STEM. But we were also interested in how that connected to their persistence in their career development. And I was inspired by, there's some additional handouts now, so just raise your hand if you still need any. I was inspired by the work that Rebecca Ryan had done when she was over the LNS advising. How many of you remember Rebecca Ryan from on campus? So she's, I think, gone into private practice now. But she used to be the director of LNS Advising Center. And she helped create a 4-year career development plan for undergraduates. It basically was first year, second year, third year, fourth year on the rows, and the columns were various tasks that students could take a part of, and the resources on campus that would help them meet that task. And so we did the same thing with that relative to career development for URM students in STEM, taking many of those 4 areas of career readiness and said, here's what we hope that you get in your first year. Focus on accessing your skills, and here are some steps you can take. And then we created literally a crosswalk. These are 4 sheets. It's on landscape paper. It's not easy to reproduce. So I just brought one hard copy if you want to look at it. But we could think about that relative to our graduate training. If we developed a crosswalk, again, I'm always looking for handouts that I could think about. What is guiding my programming in a department or a training program? So pardon the repetitive nature of the table presentation. But I think it helps us to think about being intentional about what we do. So if we had those 4 areas relating to identity and planning and decision making and exploration, and think about what are those places on campus as well as electronic and other resources that we could use to help facilitate our students' maturation across these career readiness areas. It might be very helpful. One last resource I want to share with you, oops, I went too fast, is Whiscareers. So I've already logged in. How many of you are familiar with Whiscareers? Okay, so you can get there by going to My UW. When you log in, just hit your work record tab. Everybody has it on this campus. The Whiscareers is an online computer-aided guidance, career guidance program, CACG, a computer-aided career guidance system. So if you remember back in the day at least when I was in high school in the 80s, we had Siggy and Discover. You remember those? This is the Wisconsin version of that. And so this is locally harvested, grown right here over 35 years ago. It is provided for every staff, faculty, and student here at the UW. Your student fees and other types of resources provide this access to us for free. It is a fantastic, complete resource that provides a lot of the information I was talking about in terms of those 4 areas of career readiness. When you look at this resource, you will feel that it has more of a K-12 feel. However, it is available all the way from K-12 through adults. It has been used in a lot of community job placement centers, one-stop career centers. What you'll see is that it has these tabs that's basically built like many of the information pieces we talked about, assessments that can give individual skills, interest, skills, and values assessments. The study skills assessments as well are also useful, though as the person was saying earlier that many of our graduate students we may assume are past this, but you'd be surprised. It may not be too far-fetched for them to learn about what is my learning style and how do I learn best. What you're able to do here, and I just want to highlight a few, won't have a chance to go through. Some of these resources might be more useful than others. Alyssa took this and found that career skills was very useful. Oh gosh, something happened. Oh well, it is useful. You can't see it. You just can't find it right now. But this resource allows people to think about what types of tasks and activities are they interested in doing, and these summaries of the assessments match you up with other people who are already in various fields who have the same profile and are satisfied in that career. They have limitations. They match you with the people who have the same interest profile and are satisfied in that career. And you can get a list. So for example, I'm a psychologist, I'm always going to get funeral director, I get child care worker, other things like that, people that are involved in the helping profession. So it allows you to start thinking about what else can you do, because one of the important pieces about graduate education is you have to, unless you're in the professional schools like veterinary medicine, business, or law that are training you for specific careers, we have to be thinking about transferable skills for our students. They need to be able to articulate how the constellation of competencies that they're developing in their programs are relevant across different types of job titles. That's the transferable part, right? So I happen to have research skills. I'd like to do that with people, but I can also design other types of research processes besides surveys. I can do interventions relating to communities. I can do ethnography and qualitative data interview. Those are transferable skills that aren't bound to the discipline of psychology. And being able to identify those are great. There are transferable skill pieces that come up with this. If I could just kind of acknowledge here, Amy Rivera will be the next presenter in this series who works, she's one of the program specialists with Whiscareers. So the June 23rd seminar is all about Whiscareers. She's going to go in depth in this. I'm just giving you a foreshadow of this. So Amy Rivera, make sure to come on June 23rd. Again, Alyssa's put together kind of a nice combination of skills that build on one another. You can go find occupational information. This information, okay, I guess apparently it logged me out. This information will take you to, it links to national and statewide data. You could actually find out where the job growth is and projections that's connected right to the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the federal government. You can find out where the job openings are right here in Wisconsin. For example, you put in a specific title, it will even take you right down to the actual company that's hiring right now. You can even put a Google map on there and get the driving directions right from this resource. So if people are looking for practica, they're looking for internships, they want to do a job shadow, informational interview, great resource. I also want to highlight another piece, and it may not let me go there. Oh, it's still not going to let me go there. I've been in, so it's also secure. So apparently I've been inactive too long. But the e-portfolio, I wanted to highlight that very quickly because it may not, I don't think I can do this fast enough. So let me see if I can get there one more time through my work. There you go, I have to be smarter than the computer, woohoo. So e-portfolio has an individualized learning plan, ILP, sound familiar? IDP, ILP, yeah, see, here are the 3 questions. Who am I, where am I going, how do I get there? This is an electronic online resource that allows people to put all of their information into a personal locker, and you can share it with someone, like your mentor, like your advisor, like your graduate program coordinator. So there are a lot of materials that are useful here through Whiscareers. The last thing I wanted to highlight is that when we start to talk about coordinated interventions, again, my job was just to kind of give you a quick landscape of some possibilities to consider. In July, if I may introduce Judy Ettinger, she raises her hand, she's going to offer a 3-hour workshop. Isn't that a treat? That she usually charges, and that's not a joke. She's a master career development facilitator with the National Career Development Association in the United States, and it actually is one of the top folks in the country doing this, working with everybody